Alright, video. Maybe 3 issues, 3 subjects. Something like value, objectivity. I guess we'll talk some about that. And why value relativism and, value nihilism, moral nihilism is just pretty much idiotic. And then we'll do in the, what the gradations of value are, how we make these, how we make an evaluation, how we scale value. The little bit of torture thing, the little bit of poison, ruins the pie kind of argument. Then the consent thing. Yeah, I think that's enough. Yeah. No point in doing the purpose thing again, right? When I've used the word purpose, I'm using it interchangeably with function, solution, that kind of thing, benefit. Anyway, okay, so this robot guy, whatever, Dice Validist, he keeps making these comments, he keeps doing this on these videos, I keep making points in the video about stuff, and he just keeps kind of, playing word games to get around it. And I just, go ahead and play them, but you keep calling something subjective that I'm claiming is different than what you're calling subjective, okay? We don't have an emotional reaction to the fact that we are sentient. You're just saying that that's the same as a flavor of ice cream. No, the fact that we're sentient is not a flavor of ice cream. Well, anyway, let's just do this. Can't tell the difference. I can tell the difference, but I also know that suffering ultimately doesn't matter. People are suffering right now. Is the world affected? Well, the planet Earth isn't affected, but obviously people can be affected, and they can see it as a waste and say, gee, we ought to clean up the waste. Einstein did that a lot. Does reality change somehow? Yeah, sometimes people get it right and end things like slavery and wife beating and all that kind of stuff. Billions suffering or billions in bliss, it doesn't matter objectively. So as a fact, he's saying that it's indistinguishable in terms of meaning. Value, weight, value, gravity, whether billions suffer or billions are in bliss. So he would say, yes, go ahead, flip a coin, because it doesn't really matter. Then he says, it matters to me because of my subjective emotions. Right? And so later, he says, no, I'm using non-emotional logic. Yeah, well, that's sort of, you can't do that. That's like catch-22 kind of shit. What the word emotional means something different now. You're not using non-emotional logic because you're not recognizing that there's a difference between why you feel and the fact that you feel. So I could say what causes you to feel is subjective. So whether, like if I hold up a picture of a vagina or a penis, you're going to have a certain reaction. Okay, now what that reaction is we call subjective. You're not going to calculate some sort of logical reaction. You might logically be able to explain that they have different functions and say some logical things without any emotion. Describe factually what they are and what their purposes are. But emotionally, sexually, that kind of stuff, you'll either have a pleasant or unpleasant reaction. And that's subjective. There's no intrinsic value to your emotional declaration. It's just a bigotry, it's just a subjective taste, it's just a personal sensibility. So we completely agree that emotional reactions are kind of bullshit. Okay, now the fact that you feel, okay, that's a fact, okay, and that the feelings are qualitative, that your feelings come in obvious qualitatively different states, positive and very negative. So again, your feelings range from very positive to very negative. That's a fact. So those are 2 facts. Fact number 1, you're sentient, you feel. Fact number 2, your feelings can have gradations that have value written on them in the sense of positive and negative, pleasant and unpleasant, pain, pleasure. These are all words that are heavily weighted in value quality, and it's just a fact that you have a qualitative feeling. The feeling is either a good or it's a bad feeling. I mean, it's just, you can't undo that fact, can you? You're claiming you don't have qualitative feelings, that you can't tell the difference between your own sensations of pleasure and pain, and you don't acknowledge that there's a difference between them? You don't think, when you think about what you're feeling, you don't think there's a difference between you feeling pleasure and you feeling pain? A value difference? You don't think that? But anyway, so it's a fact. It's a fact that you're a feeling organism and that your feelings are qualitative. What you feel, for what reason you feel, is not part of the subject. It's not the conversation we're having. It's not the conversation I'm having. I've said it repeatedly. I am indifferent to the causes of bad feelings, whether it's a tree on your nuts or whether, it's yummy apple pie or what. It just doesn't matter what's causing you to feel. The only thing that matters is, how do you feel? Are you comfortable or uncomfortable? That's where the value is. And I'm saying you can't give me a logical reason why it would be sensible to argue that for sentient beings there's no quality difference between pleasure and pain. There's no quality difference between pleasure and pain. Nobody sensible could argue that. Alright, so enough. Next subject. I don't know what else to do for you, okay? If you want to just keep bragging on this subject like you're somehow making a logical argument, defeating it in some sort of intellectual verbiage way, you're not, okay? I mean, to tell me what you subjectively care about is irrelevant to me. I'm saying, how do you logically defend not recognizing this distinction between pain and pleasure? I don't think you can say something rational to discount the fact that pain and pleasure are recognizably different, and what makes them recognizably different is their qualitative value expression. Just is. It's a fact. Okay. Alright, so back to this idea of what we feel, in terms of the intensity and the meaning of a feeling. Again, I'll make some of these same arguments I've made before, and somebody please provide a counter argument if you can make one sensible. I'm making a simple proposal here that there is this poison effect, this idea that it just takes one bad apple to ruin the whole pie. That suffering is dynamically more powerful than pleasure, than profit. So debt is more powerful than profit, or even bankruptcy, we say, or something. And depending on how intense the torture is, or the suffering, it just makes it unsustainable. So again, I can give these different circumstances, but there's 4 people and 3 people want to go on the fun park. It doesn't mean they're going to be horribly in pain if they don't go to the fun park. It's sort of a profit adventure, and one person will have a horrible time and suffer very much. Now, I would logically propose that it would be very stupid and unwise of the pleasure seekers to think they will do something good, okay, by ignoring how much pain the individual they're going to torture is going to experience. That pain will pollute the positive value of their pleasure, and do so in a way that will end up with some sort of negative brown color in the end. You won't be left with a positive in the end, because what you're attempting to gain isn't necessary or important or vital, wherein the suffering is vital and important and intense. And it's just the way it is. This is just a fact of our life, that it doesn't take too many victims to make something unsustainable. Very few people have to be killed by nuclear power plants for us to say nuclear power plants is not a good idea. because we can't do it right, we can't do it safely. It just doesn't take many. And certainly there's other circumstances where something is just too vital, there's too much pain for us to give something up. And then that gets into all these personal equations. So somebody else brought up some personal equation where he would let 1 million kids suffer rather than him suffer. And he was like making some kind of point, like somehow that I was supposed to be impressed by that. You can be that way. The simple argument's going to be is that your life is going to be far short of its potential good. So it's just going to mean that in the game of chess or something, you could have won in 2 moves, and instead you lost in 700 moves. I mean, the choice was there, the opportunity was there to capitalize on your existence and make it very profitable, and you chose to make your existence very not profitable by not exploiting a huge profit opportunity. It's just not logical. I'm not saying you should be emotionally comfortable with sacrificing ever. You should never feel, you don't have to feel good about being a slave, but it's the circumstance of the game we're in. That's the insidiousness of this game. Is this game creates a dynamic where obligation of intelligence is going to require you to compromise your selfish interest. All selfish interests become compromised by logic because there's just too much to be gained. The thought experiment was modified to the body part argument. People do that often. Well, why don't you just sell your organs to go save people? Well, if you could prove to me that those people were going to do something in the world better than me, that they were going to create more constructive change in the world in some kind of constructive way, if you could prove that, then yeah, I would have a rational obligation to invest in their lives rather than mine. Investing in this body is dependent on this body being able to produce. That's all we can do here. Okay? Whether there's pain in my brain or pain in another brain can't rationally be distinguished. It can only be distinguished by a bigotry. You can only make a distinction through bigotry. You can't make a distinction through anything logical or sensible or rational. So the game really is maximizing the performance of the sentience and the thinking machines on this planet. And if you can demonstrate to me that, mining my body parts would make the world a better place in the end, I'm probably going to be persuaded if you have evidence of that. Personally, I'm not going to like it. There's going to be, right now, it could be easily argued that I should be spending some time, creating pen pals in Africa and sending them whatever loose change I have. That's probably a sensible thing to do in terms of I can comfort them pretty easily, rather than the people here who are so hard to comfort. You need so much to make people comfortable here. They need iPods, and they need comfy beds, and they need air conditioning, and they need all kinds of shit. And so it's so expensive to make somebody happy here, where it's so cheap to make somebody happy over there. But yeah, that does require us to compromise ourselves and our own comfort, and that's always difficult. And I would concede that yeah, I don't play the game as well as I should. But I'm not going to sit there and say I shouldn't play a better game. So, you can say that you wouldn't do it. That's okay. I'm just going to say I would hope that you'd want to play a better game. That you'd want your performance to be better than that. And all I could really do is say, yeah, well, no one's going to write anything great on your grave like this guy really, got every ounce of good out of his existence. That's not going to be the diagnosis of your performance. The diagnosis is going to be, yeah, he got sucked into his personal ego crap and couldn't get out of that spiral and just kind of wasted all kinds of opportunities because he was just basically a selfish son of a bitch. So yeah, you're going to just get qualified a selfish son of a bitch. I think I called him a sucktard. Yeah, that's what you are. You're a sucktard because you're wasting opportunity. Logically visible opportunity. The map is right there to be seen, okay? 1 million kids suffering versus you suffering, and you can't fucking figure that out. that maybe that's just too good a deal. You can prevent the suffering of 1 million kids if you suck it up, and you can't see the value there. I'm sure you can. You just don't want to, because you're a selfish son of a bitch, right? So what else is there to say? You're a selfish cunt. Man, not complicated. Okay, and the last subject I want to do was this consent thing again, because this is really just such a simple point, and I haven't heard any rational argument disputing it. This idea that if you don't have consent, and obviously you can't get consent, that's not the issue, whether you can get consent from a fetus. Obviously you can't. But the argument is when you don't have consent, you have a higher standard of performance. So always, when the law recognizes this, when you're going to do something and you're going to do it and it's going to impact your neighbors, there's a higher standard. If it's just going to affect you, who cares? Right? If you build a deck on your house and you're the only asshole that's going to be on it, you're the only asshole that would ever fall off of it or it would crumble, society probably wouldn't give a shit. It would just say, go ahead, make a bad deck. But if you're going to invite other people over with the expectation that the deck's made out of like real wood and shit, then you have a higher standard of performance. You got to make a deck that'll actually support people being on it. So yeah, there's this acknowledgement that you can impose risk on yourself, but when you're imposing risk on somebody else, it's a higher standard. And I would argue that how have the pro-natalists, the pro-choicers on natalism, applied any higher standard? How are they demonstrated that these people have shown themselves to have some better argument than the default of don't make a mess? And let's understand, the default has no demonstrable harm related to it. So the default of doing nothing, not reproducing, has no logical, describable harm possible. No one will go to jail. Nobody will burn to death. No possible harm can come to somebody if you don't create them. And so this makes for a very high standard, because you're creating all the risk now through your behavior, and you're doing it without consent. Then what's the rational argument? So shouldn't people be, what is unreasonable for people to say, well, where's your evidence that your optimism is correct? Where's your evidence of this will all work out okay? Where's your evidence that I can take your comfort, I can torture you because we're going to have a better world in the future? And even if you had even the slightest argument, you're still enslaving somebody to your purposes. So it's like just saying that, oh well, it worked out okay, the Trail of Tears, because yes, civilization prevailed. You could argue that the hundreds of years of slavery was, it was good for America because we got all that free productivity, when we really needed it. It advanced progress 100 years sooner. Some kind of dopey argument like that. So you're allowed to take from somebody else when it's to your advantage. How does that even make any sense? So I'm just arguing that when you don't have consent, you pretty much have to be behaving in a perfect manner. You have to guarantee, when you don't have consent to give somebody something, that what you're going to give them isn't herpes. You have to kind of guarantee it's a gift. It has to be the gift of life if you're going to impose it. And if you can't be sure it's going to be the gift of life, you really have no ethical right. There's no ethical diagram you could draw to explain why anybody would have a right to impose herpes. There just isn't. You don't have an ethical right to impose herpes on someone who never consented to have sex with you. Sort of. And this rationale that because you have a penis or a vagina, a uterus, that somehow the equipment is what gives you the right is idiotic as saying if I buy a car I should be allowed to drive. I mean, having the ability to do something doesn't give you the right to do it. So, I mean, all adult philosophers should be able to get past that hurdle. So anyway, I don't want to make a hugely long video. It's just that these concepts haven't been touched by all these these people who claim they've made counter-arguments. And I'd like to hear a rational counter-argument to the simple, rock-solid logic that has been provided you.